So Doug, if I'm a commercial metal roofing contractor, how does you and your team help me succeed?
We can help out a number of ways. First is we can be a project lead generation source for our contractor partners. We're looking at metal roofing opportunities all over the country that range from light commercial to school projects to military projects. So we can help our contractors grow their business that way. We can also look at opportunities that they want to bring to us and make sure that they can qualify for opportunities that they found on their own and make sure that we can support them, whether it's through testing and engineering or backing them with the required warranties on their projects. We can also work with their architect and GC partners to get Sheffield specified on opportunities that we're not already specified on to help them grow their business that way. And lastly, we can tie them in with our technical department if they have any questions about installation details or best practices or testing and engineering requirements that show up on projects.
Being able to perform a commercial metal roofing job is more than just having the right tooling set. It's understanding the specifications, the installation assembly, and the required testing that you're gonna have to provide to that project. At Sheffield Metals, we have a commercial department dedicated to help you as a commercial contractor expand your business and perform work well. So today I've got Doug Markle from the commercial team. We're gonna talk about all of it today. Which profiles you should offer, what types of metal buildings you can perform work on, and what your expansion plan looks like for your business. Doug, thanks for being here.
You bet, Thad.
So what's a scenario where a commercial contractor might want to expand into another tooling set or another profile that they offer? You know, what's a good scenario where you suggest that being an option?
The two common scenarios that we encounter is contractors involved in light retail probably has an 1.5 inch mechanical profile, which is a great profile, can do a number of different things, has good testing and engineering. They want to start getting into some military or school projects, and maybe it's low slope applications, and they need a bigger panel. So that's where we talk about moving from an 1.5 inch maybe into a 2 inch mechanical, or they might have a 1 3/4 snap block, which is a versatile panel profile. It can do residential and commercial. Again, it's got good testing and engineering, but it's got slope limitations on it. And when you start talking about those jobs that get below a 212 pitch, we really recommend that 2 inch mechanical panel profile. And that's where we might talk about adding a set of tooling to their existing arsenal, if you will, and their machine.
So it's safe to say that not all commercial projects are created equal. So it really depends on what a commercial contractor, you know, what lane that they want to play in. And that kind of helps determine what actual tooling they have for their business.
Yep. Every project, commercial project, usually is going to have a specification attached to it. And the requirements and performance requirements in those specs is going to vary depending upon what type of project it is. And it might vary from whether it has a weather tightness warranty or whether it doesn't. And all the panel performance requirements from wind uplift, air infiltration, water submersion, so on and so forth. So yes, no project, no two projects are alike, for sure.
If we're talking about adding another set of tooling, you know, for example, that 1.5 inch standing seam to 2 inch mechanical seam, you know, what's the difference between those two panels in the scope of what actually needs to be performed to install those panels? You know, is there a learning curve between one or the other?
Yeah, if we're talking 1.5 inch mechanical to a 2 inch mechanical, obviously they're both mechanically seamed. The contractor probably has experience doing that with that 1.5 inch already. But as you go into a 2 inch mechanical, when it's installed, we're talking about a 1/2 inch difference in seam height. It uses more material in the forming of that panel. So they're used to buying a certain coil width. That's going to change. So that's a conversation to start having with your supplier about different coil sizes and coil availability. That needs a different seamer. They're using a mechanical seamer to seam those panel profiles. The 2 inch panel seamer is usually a bigger seamer that has more stations on it. So there's usually an added expense going not only in adding the tooling, but you might need added accessories that go along with that to seam that panel.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine that for any, profile. If you're changing seam height, you're also going to have different trim calculations. Your flashing is going to change.
You're going to have different clips.
Yep, different clips. Looking at the 2-inch specifically, now you're talking about more of a structural panel. So now you can perform over open framing. So there's, different, again, it's kind of picking that lane and understanding everything that goes into it.
Absolutely.
So let's think about, if I'm a contractor and I say, I see the opportunity for the, let's say adding a 2-inch mechanical or 1 3/4 snap, it doesn't matter. But, I'm not sure I want to tie up my cash right now if I'm not sure I'm going to have one of these jobs that are coming up. What are some strategies that I can employ as a commercial contractor to limit my risk, but still have those opportunities, if I choose to expand?
That's a great question. I think that's where our commercial architectural technical team at Sheffield, we call it the CAT team, can come into play. And we encourage those contractors to engage with us because, as you said at the beginning of this, that's the space that we're living in and day out. And we're looking at project opportunities all over the country. So we can have those conversations with those contractors who are considering expanding and growing their business that way. We can show them project leads that already exist and size of projects and scope of work and everything that's involved. And they can kind of get a feel for whether or not there's enough work out there potentially to support them making that decision and adding that investment and growing the business that way.
Not to mention, Sheffield stocks NewTek machinery tooling. NewTek has, good tooling set, turnover time, lead times. So the tools are available, right? It's just finding
Absolutely.
that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
What would you say to, a residential contractor or somebody that maybe has done a little bit of light commercial, light retail, and they want to take that step into commercial and they see these opportunities out here? What would you say to them? What are those steps that they could take in order to expand their business? Again, limiting that risk.
I think it's very similar to some of the things that we've already talked about with guys going from maybe light commercial to large scale commercial projects or military projects. Probably the couple of biggest differences going from residential to commercial is all of the different performance requirements that are specified and usually the weather type warranty process that doesn't exist on the residential side that does exist on the commercial side. It's more detail-oriented work, inspections involved. It's a slower process. The life cycle of a job is usually much longer than a residential job. So know that you're going to be tying up your crews for longer periods of time to get a job done. Usually companies are required to be bonded and insured as well. So you'd want to make sure that your company's coverage and everything is up to the standards that are required on that project. So you're qualified as a contractor to perform on that project. That would probably be the couple of biggest things that we usually see guys who are making that jump from residential to commercial, they need to consider.
Something else that I've seen is, with tooling sets specifically, you can get a flush wall panel, for example, from NewTek, which is specified in projects. That's another lane, right? Metal wall panels versus metal roofing. So there's a kind of a whole other can of worms there as well. So it's important to understand the process, before you jump in and start bidding on a job that you're not really sure what that looks like to actually perform on.
That's a great point. A lot of the commercial projects we see are not just roofs. All of them, obviously, that we're looking at have standing seam metal roofing, but there can be metal walls. There's usually a lot of metal soffit involved on there as well. So those are things to consider. You might be looking at adding a roof panel, but you might also need to add a flush wall / soffit profile to your tooling as well, for sure.
What's the difference between some of these military jobs versus a standard industrial or commercial job? That's important for someone to know before they go bidding on a job like that?
Probably the biggest things that we see on the military projects, the performance requirements are usually the same from a wind uplift, hail impact resistance, air infiltration, et cetera standpoint. Types of material, we see a lot of aluminum and thick aluminum, 040 aluminum specified on military projects. If it does go steel, it's usually in a 22 gauge thickness, which is a thicker substrate than the light commercial or residential contractors are used to dealing with when they're doing a lot of 24 gauge. So it's just working with different substrates. The panel profiles, obviously we've already talked about, but different substrates, and as a result, added costs, and knowing that your expense on materials is probably going to be increased when you start looking into those projects.
So Doug, as we're wrapping up here, how can someone get in contact with the commercial team to help expand their business?
Through a number of different ways. That they can reach out to their Sheffield account manager, who can pass along our telephone numbers and email addresses. They can reach out to their inside sales representative or the branch manager at their respective branch. Any one of those people knows how to get them in contact with us, whether it's through email or through telephone.
Excellent. All right, Doug. Well, thanks so much for the information. Appreciate it.
You bet.
If you've got any questions, comment down below, or as Doug mentioned, reach out to your Sheffield Metals account manager or visit sheffieldmetals.com. Subscribe here to the Metal Roofing channel. As always, I'm Thad Barnette. We'll catch you next time.